And so the shelves last another year, unroasted by Goblin Fire. Now we all know that's because they're unroastable. They are the bane of the Goblin. So let us tour them. Let us tour and look upon the shelves that will remain when all has fallen to dust. It's a bookshelf tour. I'm gonna show you my shelves. Okay. Starting at the top left, we have the obligatory Tolkien corner. We have the movie tie-in covers. These were some of the first books in this collection. And while I don't normally like the movie tie-in covers for fantasy books, I think these ones look really, really good. The movies have become so synonymous with this story, and because it's a wee bit more abstract, not focusing in on the actors, and it's more like landscape and set pieces, I think this works really, really well. Next up, we have a couple of Tolkien oddities, like this tiny little Tolkien treasury book, a book on the most underrated character in fantasy. Don't even leave a comment. I don't want to hear it. It's fact. A Tolkien dictionary and an encyclopedia of Tolkien's work. I also have these two older copies, one of The Hobbit and one of The Silmarillion. Now, The Silmarillion is the only Tolkien book here that I've not read yet, so might get to this in 2024. Next up, we have this beautiful deluxe edition of Lord of the Rings. This has illustrations from Tolkien himself, which is something that really drew me to this edition in particular, because there are loads of stunning Tolkien Lord of the Rings editions. But the fact that this has Tolkien's own imaginings of some of the landscapes and the characters, I thought this would be a really cool one to read from. It also has a bunch of fold-out maps. Who doesn't love a good map? There is also a Hobbit and Silmarillion in the same design that I'm hoping to pick up one day. Next up, we have these brand new Kingkiller editions. They came directly from Galan's. They have these really nice sprayed edges and also really nice naked hardbacks. The covers are also embossed, and I really like just the overall look of these editions. Also hiding in the back there, we have this Tad Williams paperback. I bought this before I realized this was a follow-up series, but I'm really looking forward to reading some of Tad Williams' work. I also have the two Rothfuss novellas. Galan's were nice enough to send me a copy of The Narrow Road Between Desires, and I already had a copy of The Slow Regard of Silent Things. Next up, we have the Gentleman Bastard series. I absolutely love The Lies of Locke Lamora. It was such a good book, so I want to continue on to Red Seas Under Red Skies, and then book 3. And right at the end here, we have an Arc of Flames of Mira. I have talked about this book a lot. I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait for the sequel, which is coming out in 2024. Coming down a shelf, this is exactly the same as last year. It is the Wheel of Time 2013 set, I believe, that creates the wheel over all the spines. It even has New Spring right on the end, which is the prequel book. And I know New Spring should really be on the other side because it is a prequel, but it does actually have the end of the wheel on the design on the spine. So it's meant to be on the right hand side. Coming down a shelf, we kind of have a mishmash of things. We have Ninth House and Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. Then we have the broken binding editions of Legends and Lattes and Bookshops in Bone Dust. And these have really nice sprayed edges and also naked hardbacks. I am a massive fan of the Ember Blade and the Shadow Casket, some of my favourite books of all time, so I knew I had to check out more of Chris Wooding's work, so I picked up Retribution Falls, which is a steampunk pirate fantasy with heists and airships. This sounds so good. I've not read it yet, but if Ember Blade and Shadow Casket are anything to go by, I think I will very much like this book. Next, we have the Queen of Fantasy herself, Robin Hobb. I did a whole video of my reading experience of the first book, and I do plan on picking up the second in January. And I am worried. I am very worried. Next up, we have a bunch of Sanderson paperbacks. We have the First Era Mistborn, Mistborn Era 2, as well as Warbreaker, Arcanum Unbound, which is a bind-up of a bunch of novellas and short stories from the Cosmere, as well as this hardcover bind-up of his Legion series. On this shelf, we have mostly hardbacks. We have the Prince of Thorns 10th Anniversary Edition from Broken Binding. I absolutely love the cover on this. It's absolutely stunning, and it does come with sprayed edges and a nice design on the naked hardback, because it is Broken Binding, and that's what they do. Next up, we have hard copies of the Nevernight Chronicles from J. Christoph, and these are the US covers. I do like the UK ones, but I just love these US ones just a little bit more. Next up, we also have Empire of the Vampire from J. Christoph. I love this book so much, and I cannot wait for the sequel in 2024. Then I have The Justice of Kings and The Tyranny of Faith. This is the Broken Binding edition of Babel by R.F. Kuang, which means it has red sprayed edges, as well as this really nice red naked hardback. There's also hardcover copies of the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. Here's another case of Andrew didn't do his homework, because I got a copy of The Empire's Ruin just to find out that it is also a sequel series. So I picked up the US floppy paperbacks for the original trilogy and this standalone novel called Skullsworn, this in the same series. You just can't beat a floppy paperback. And right at the end there we have a Master of Jin. And right at the bottom of the left hand side we have this absolutely packed sci-fi shelf. First we have these two SF masterworks, The Forever War and Flowers for Algernon. Next we have Mickey 7 with the Broken Earth trilogy and The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. And we have the first 4 June books. And hiding in the back we have Arc of a Scythe. Next we have Stormblood and Titan Hoppers by Rob J. Hayes. A memory called Empire and a desolation called Peace. Now these have stunning edges that match the covers. I love the edges on these, as well as nice naked hardbacks. And you probably guessed it, they are Broken Binding editions. Next up we have the Children of Time trilogy by Adrian Tchaikovsky. These are also Broken Binding editions that have these really nice space edges. It's rare that I show the edges instead of the spines, but you just have to for these. Really need to pick this trilogy up because I know Johan over at Library of a Viking is a huge fan of that first book, and he's recommended it to me a couple times, so I really need to get around to reading it. I believe it's YA sci-fi trilogy from Amy Kaufman and J. Christoph. It was the covers that first drew me to this series, and then I read the premise, and I'm not normally a YA reader at all, but there's just something about this series that sounds like it'd be a really good, just fun, easy read. And right at the end, we have the first 3 Skyward books, as well as the novella Bind Up. I still need to pick up Defiant, and I still need to read Defiant, but I have read the first 3 and all of the novellas, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the conclusion. Moving over to the second shelf, we have the Sando shelf. And these are probably the editions that I get the most amount of questions about, but they are just the standard US hardbacks for Stormlight, but they have the Kraken Co. dust jackets that I have put over top. I do prefer the Michael Whalen covers, but I absolutely love the spines of these Kraken Co. slip jackets, so that's what I display most of the time. I also have the Way of Kings leatherbound books, probably my favourite book/books in the whole of my collection, as well as the 4 Dragonsteel secret projects that came out this year. And in the corner there we have the Orbit Special Edition of The Eye of the World. Now this might be my favourite shelf on the entire bookshelf. First of all, I love that you can see the salt lamp right beside it, but I also have a ton of favourites on this shelf. And I did say last year that my one big aim and dream for this bookshelf was to one day hold my own book. And I'm so happy to say I made that happen this year in 2023 with the release of my debut book, Harbinger of Justice. First of all, we have the Broken Binding edition of The First Binding. This cover is absolutely beautiful. It also has black sprayed edges because it's the Broken Binding edition. Some hard copies of the Bloodsworn books. I love these so much, and I cannot wait for book 3. We have another Broken Binding edition of The Sons of Darkness. This has a beautiful cover and sprayed edges to match. We have Harbinger of Justice. I love how the art turned out in this book, done by Felix Ortiz. I could not be happier, and also the design is on the naked hardback without the typography. Next up, we have one of my favourite series of all time, The Dark Water Legacy, starting with The Ember Blade and the sequel, The Shadow Casket. I love these books so much, and they have nice sprayed edges. And we have the first 2 Burning books from Evan Winter, The Rage of Dragons and The Fire of Vengeance. These books are also amazing. The Will of the Many, this is the Broken Binding edition again. I know there's a theme here, I'm sorry. This is a fairly recent pickup, but after hearing so much good things about this book, I knew I had to grab a copy. It seems to be so many people's favourite book of the year, so I'm excited to give this one a read. And right at the end we have the Illumicrate edition of The Empire of the Vampire. I bought this really nice gold edition after absolutely loving this book. Next up, hidden in the darkness, we have The Helm of Midnight. Then we have the Illumicrate editions of the Greenbone Saga with really nice sprayed edges. Next up, we have the Broken Binding editions of the Lycanius trilogy that have really nice naked hardbacks. And I also have the Roots of Chaos. I don't know if it's considered a duology because they are standalones, but these books, The Priory of an Orange Tree and A Day of Fallen Night. Now this is another case where I have the edges pointed out because dragons edges, they look so good. And in the corner I have a Jim Butcher stack with the first 5 Dresden books and all of the Codex Alera books. However, a couple of them are tucked down the back just because they don't fit, but I didn't really want to separate them either. And in this corner here I have my Terry Pratchett collection, starting with the hardcover of Good Omens, as well as this pretty chunky stack of beat-up paperbacks that I love so much. I love the original artwork. They're so wacky and zany and match the tone of the series so well. Now these bottom 2 shelves are all self-published and indie books. That's one thing I'm really pleased about my collection this year compared to last year, is I have a lot more self-published and indie books, because there are so many gems in the indie and self-published space. First up, we have Daniel Green's debut and sequel, Breach of Peace and Rebel's Creed. Then we have a paperback of Harbinger of Justice. Terrific book, 10 out of 10. Then I have a copy of Isla's Reach. Terrific book. This is the self-published edition of Legends and Lattes. An ARC copy of Darkness and Light by Ryan Cahill. This stunning edition of The Sword of Kaigan from Wraithmarch Creative. This is such a good book and I cannot get over that Felix Ortiz cover. It just looks incredible. Now the next 3 books are all from the Broken Binding Press. I have talked about this before, but I'll just mention it really quickly again. Broken Binding do special editions of self-published and indie works. So far this is the 3 that they have released, however they've got a couple coming up as well. Starting with an omnibus of the Pillars of Peace trilogy. Then we have this stunning edition of Illborn and their copy of Blood and Fire. All 3 just look incredible and have really nice naked hardback designs, and I cannot wait to see what self-published books that they will be doing next. Right at the end we have the 5 hardbacks of the War Eternal series from Rob J. Hayes. Incredible series, and all of them have the design on the naked hardback as well. And the last shelf is also an indie shelf. First we have the Songs of Chaos trilogy by Michael R. Miller. I cannot wait to read these. And the covers are absolutely stunning. I love the dragons. I've made it clear on here, I'm a sucker for dragons. If it has dragons, I'm sold. Next up we have The Price of Power and War Song by Michael Mitchell. We have Blackstone Heart by Michael R. Fletcher, which is probably in my top 5 covers of all time. Next we have The Faded Dragon by Cameron Michaels. There are so many Michael and Michaels. Then we have The Forsaken Planet by Brian Wilson. The Elements of Time by Sam Paisley. Heliotrope by Palmer Pickering. The Peace of Freysdale by Michael Richards. No Heart for a Thief by James Doolan. Path of the Eternal Sun by Taylor Crook and Ryan Kirk. Then we have A Sea of Cinders and a Prophecy Unsung by Adam Bishop. The Rivener by Garrett Godsey. My paperback edition of Illborn and the sequel Ajuel's Sin. Fauville by D.K. Pike. And The Never Ending End of the World by Anne Christie. On top of the shelf we have some other Sanderson books. We have Long Chills and Keisto. There's also the Dawnshard novella and The Way of Kings Prime. Then next up we have the Murderbot Diaries, some of my favourite books of all time. Then we kind of have just a random stack of books, Black Leopard and Red Wolf, as well as Moonwitch Spider King. I also have these 2 volumes of Grand Blue Dreaming, which is a manga series. I know absolutely nothing about it, but a friend recommended it. Then we have The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, which I think I learned about from Murphy Napier, and I read that last year. It's a really wholesome, nice story. Origins of Wheel of Time and Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. We don't talk about that. I also have a wooden mat of the Map of Taris, which is the country where Harbinger of Justice, my book, takes place. This was a gift from a family member on the release date of the book. I absolutely love this. It's a beautiful map. As well as a letter opener, Nightblood, that I got from the Year of Sanderson. Moving to the other side, we have some Leigh Bardugo, the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which I've read. I was kind of mixed on it, as well as Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Then I've got my Song of Ice and Fire books, kind of hidden behind my Shire Medal Conquer Challenge, which is this app where you run the distance between the Shire and Bree. It's a virtual challenge that you can do in the app, and then they send you the medal once you've crossed the distance. It was a lot of fun. And then we have Dracula, Tales of Norse Mythology, and Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. As well as this shelf, I do have what I have dubbed the other shelf, which is a shelf in the other room that you never get to see on camera. So I thought we could have a quick look at that one too. So the first shelf is mainly an Abercrombie shelf. We have the First Law trilogy, which was the Broken Binding's first ever sub-series for their subscription. And of course, it got the Broken Binding treatment, so it has really nice hardback designs, as well as sprayed edges. Same with the Great, I keep on forgetting what this is called, the Great Levelier trilogy, which is Joe Abercrombie's standalone series. These are also Broken Binding editions. They've not done Sharp Ends yet, but we do have Best Served Cold, The Heroes, and Red Country, which likewise have really nice designs on the naked hardbacks, as well as these really detailed sprayed edges, which is why they're pointing out on my shelves, because I really like the sprayed edges on this series. I also have the hardcover copies of the second series in the First Law world, starting with A Little Hatred, then The Trouble with Peace, and The Wisdom of Crowds. And I like all of Joe Abercrombie's titles, but I especially love the titles of this last trilogy. Such a cool title setup. They're all really interesting and unique. And in the corner there, we have the Litjoy Nevernight Chronicle editions by J. Christoph. Now, these are kind of hard to show on camera, but it is Nevernight, God's Grave, and Dark Dawn. They have the Never Flinch, Never Fear, Never Forget sprayed onto the edges. Further footnotes, because the original trilogy already has footnotes, whereas he has added footnotes a bit about his inspiration and why he did some of the things he did in the trilogy throughout the entire 3 books, which I think is just a really unique reading experience to see his thought process and influences while you're reading the trilogy itself. On top of this shelf, we have my 2 manga Uzumaki, which I did a full reading video for. I had a lot of fun reading this one. Definitely want to try more Junji Ito next year. And I also have this first omnibus of Berserk. I put up a poll for which manga I should try out after Uzumaki, and Berserk won, so I'm looking forward to reading this a lot. Now on the shelf itself, we have the Wolf of Oren-Yaro, the Ikasar Falcon, and the Dragon of Jin Seyang. This was again part of the Broken Binding sub, so it has these nice sprayed edges and naked hardback. One of them is a dragon. Next up, we have the Tide Child trilogy, starting with the Bone Ships, then the Call of the Bone Ships, and then the Bone Ships Wake. I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but this is another Broken Binding set. It was part of their subscription. This is kind of the Broken Binding shelf. So the sprayed edges has this black and white ship and this massive sea serpent in the water beneath it, which I think looks amazing. Equally, the naked hardbacks are really nice, with this sort of underwater look, with the serpents being silver and all this devastation around them. Then the most recent set that Broken Binding sent out is the Powder Mage trilogy. Now they did something a wee bit different with this set. They still have the really nice sprayed edges, but with the naked hardbacks, what they did was they went with full illustrations instead of this more iconography type naked hardback. And I think they turned out so well. I love how this set looks. Then right on the end, we have the Desert Prince and the Cyberpunk book. Now the Desert Prince I picked up thinking it was the first book in a series, and technically it is, but just like The Empire's Ruin, this is a sequel series, so I really need to read Peter V. Brett's other work before getting to this, so that was a mistake on my part. And this Cyberpunk book, I love Cyberpunk. Both the game and Witch's Sin by Daniel Green were terrific. I love the show as well, the Edgerunners show on Netflix. At the back, we have the Broken Binding editions of the Winnowing Flame trilogy. Ruination, which is a League of Legends book. I've never played League of Legends, but I loved Arcane. Such a good show. I cannot wait for season 2. Certain Dark Things, which is this weird detective noir vampire thing, it was completely a cover buy, and it's an entertaining read. And Daughter of Redwinter. Next up, we have the Pattern and the Pact trilogy. It's following a scholar as the protagonist, which is really interesting. And at the end we have the Covenant of Steel trilogy. Now last, but certainly not least, the last shelf of all the shelves, we have a mishmash of random books. To start with, this notebook down the side is actually filled with art prints. I was looking for something to do with all these art prints that come with special editions, and I landed on having this little notebook where I can just kind of store them all. So if you're ever wondering what to do with your art prints apart from hanging them up, this might be a good option. This is also now where I store my Rick Riordan books. We have the Heroes of Olympus series, and at the back I also have my Percy Jackson books and the Trials of Apollo. Here we have the Goblin Emperor, How Do You Live, and the Book Eaters. Now the Book Eaters and the Goblin Emperor are both broken binding editions. And How Do You Live I picked up because there is a new Studio Ghibli film called The Boy and the Heron. And that film is based off of this book. We also have a Sons of Darkness paperback, Combat Codes, and The Bone Shard Daughter, Legends of the Condor Heroes. This is said to be a Chinese Lord of the Rings. I've heard mixed things about the translation, but I think if you don't know the original works, you should be okay. And Pluto Shine. Here we have The Book That Wouldn't Burn, Age of Ash, and The Lost War. Down the back we have Gods of the Weirdwood by R.J. Barker. I should really put this beside the Tide Child trilogy, so I might move that about now that I see that that's separate. There's also the Malevolent Seven and Ascension. All three of these broken binding editions. Next, Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kwong, Fourth Wing, and 2 V.E. Schwab books, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and Gallant. Then we have the Kane Chronicles by Rick Riordan. This was part of the inspiration and the reason that I included Egyptian mythology in my own book, because I read these just as we were doing Ancient Egypt in school, and it just really piqued my interest. So I love these books so much. There's also the Mortal Engine series, and my old copies of Percy Jackson and Trials of Apollo. Checkmate Goblin! Checkmate! Unroastable! Don't even need this water. There's no flames here. No flames here. That is the shelf tour of the unroastable shelves that Daniel wouldn't dare roast. But let me know in the comments below, what is this collection missing? What do I need to pick up in 2024? And also, what is your favorite book in your collection? I do want to add that collecting and reading are two very separate hobbies. You don't need to have a big collection of books to be a reader. You don't need to have any books nowadays. All you need is a way to access these stories. Because when it comes down to it, it's the stories and the characters and the worlds that really stick with the readers. And a huge thank you to my patrons who keep this channel alive. Over there is bonus videos, writing snippets of whatever I'm working on, and you also get to pick what books and then vote on what we read for the monthly book club. So thank you again, your support is huge. So thank you very much for watching. Outro. Sorry Meg, you can go back to your nap now.